Last week, I talked about 5 defining stats of the 2024 Brewers, more of a team view. Well, today it's going to be more of a player's view. So, talk about who are some of the individual players and some stats that stand out from some of the players that had big contributions in 2024. Not as much of, say, the team ERA or the team defensive run saved, but more specific stats. So, here are 5 defining stats from the 2024 Brewers, 5 more defining stats from the 2024 Brewers. The first one is William Contreras, 679 plate appearances. Now, that wasn't even most on the Brewers, but the big thing for him was it was the most in 50 years by an NL primary catcher, and that was Johnny Bench who did it back in 1974. So Contreras, not only did he set a career high in plate appearances, not only did he pace the league at his position, but he also had the most since 1974, and it's a testament to his ability to post every day, to play, whether it's catching or DHing, which it was mostly catching, but to be in the lineup every day. He played, I think it was the first 80 games of the year, somewhere around there, and had a fantastic year, even though he played that much. I think sometimes players will set that mindset of wanting to play every day, which is a good thing, but then they may not quite be at their top shape when they get to July or August. Contreras did crater a little bit in those middle months, but then came back in September. The second stat that I guess it's a group of stats for Willy Adames, and he had 688 plate appearances, which was most by a Brewer since Prince Fielder in 2011. Now, that's extremely impressive, but not quite as impressive with him being a shortstop and not a primary catcher, even though he did spend fewer days at DH. 32 home runs. He set the record for most by a Brewer shortstop in a single season, primary shortstop, and he broke his own record of 31 back in 2022. He also had 112 RBIs, and he had the best wins above replacement by a Brewers shortstop than any player, any shortstop, except for Robin Yount 4 times and then Bill Hall 1 time, Bill Hall's breakout year. So those are a few stats. The 4.8 wins above replacement. You've got the 32 homers, the 112 RBIs, which is second by a Brewers shortstop in a single season, and then the 688 plate appearances. So hard to pick one with Willy Adames, but there's a couple, and we'll kind of lump them together into one. The third one does not involve one of their superstars, but it's Brian Hudson, who had a .722 whip. And you may have forgotten about Brian Hudson after he was omitted from the playoff roster, but he had a fantastic year, 62 innings, 1.73 ERA. But the .722 whip is what stands out most. Why? Because among all 201 pitchers with at least 40 innings this year, he was number 1. He had the best whip in baseball. And then, of course, his velo dropped. He struggled a little bit in August after he had been worked so heavily in the first half. And things kind of went off the rails for him. Late in the year, was sent down to AAA to work through some things and then never made it back to the majors. So we will see him again next year, and I expect him to be a big part of the Brewers' success. But he was also a little bit emblematic of the Brewers' season. He had a great first half. He had some success in the second half, which the Brewers did. But then the playoffs, of course, he was left off the roster. So it's not his fault that they lost, but a little bit of maybe some... so kind of representative of the story of the 2024 Brewers. Fourth stat involves the rookies. I remember going into the year, I said the Brewers were going to need to rely on some rookies and then also some second-year guys like Bryce Turang, Blake Perkins, or Sal Frelick. But the rookies really stepped up. They had 5 guys who had at least 1.5 wins above replacement. Jackson Chourio, of course, led that with 3.8. But they also had Tobias Myers at 2.7. Brian Hudson at 2.5, Joey Ortiz at 2.6, Jared Koenig at 1.5. Koenig is the most surprising of these guys, but Hudson was very surprising as well. Ortiz played as well as you could have expected from him. Tobias Myers, of course, was not expected to really be much of a factor this year. He was probably 11th or 12th on the depth chart of starting pitchers going into the year. And then Jackson Chourio, big things were expected, maybe in 2025 or 2026. But he met those expectations and then exceeded them in 2024. And our fifth stat involves Jackson Chourio. It's that he had 3.8 wins above replacement. And here's a list of players who are age 20 or younger to record at least 3.8 wins above replacement in a season. Pardon me, it's a little bit long, but the names are well worth hearing. Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle, Al Kaline, Frank Robinson, Veda Pinson, Johnny Bench, Claudel Washington, Roberto Alomar, Ken Griffey Jr., A-Rod, Adrian Beltre, Jason Hayward, Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, Manny Machado, Carlos Correa, Ronald Acuna Jr., Fernando Tatis Jr., and Juan Soto. Now, most of those guys are either in the Hall of Fame or on their way to the Hall of Fame. Claudell Washington is probably the one that his career probably didn't go the way that he hoped. But even Jason Hayward or Veda Pinson, not Hall of Famers, but still had excellent careers. And then pretty much all the other guys are either in the Hall of Fame or on their way to the Hall of Fame, unless they were involved in PEDs in the case of A-Rod or presumably Fernando Tatis Jr. at some point. So Jackson Chourio, I mean, he had as good of a rookie year as you could have asked for. The names on this list alone, and there were plenty of other stats I could have picked. The 2020 season at age 20, and then having 2 home runs in the postseason game coming up big. Pretty much everything Chourio did, especially from June onward, was the stuff of a superstar, a future Hall of Famer. I'm not going to jump there yet, but certainly showed the makings of that in his first year in the big leagues, and really was, I think, the defining player of the 2024 Brewers, if not the most valuable. That title maybe goes to Contreras or Adames. So again, 5 defining stats from the 2024 Brewers on a more playing level, not the team level, but zooming in a little bit more on the players and some of their impressive feats in 2024.